No reason whatsoever to do that. I just felt like doing it. What the hell? What a start to my day. What a start. Hi, everybody. I'm What's Left of Russ Kane. This is The Daily Show. This is Men's Radio Station. We're at you, well, The Daily Show 3 times a week. Here's my day. I opened the kitchen cupboard. Now, do you have those thermal glasses at home? You know the one, I don't mean these reading glasses. I mean, you know, the ones that keep your tea and your coffee warm. Those double-walled glass, right? Flies out of the kitchen cupboard. Explodes all over my kitchen. Tiny little fragments. I had to take everything out of the kitchen, clean the entire kitchen. This is the beginning of the day. Hoover everything, wash it. I'm still finding these little things. It's like a piece of ordnance that's been banned by the United Nations or whoever it is keeps the peace, which is nobody, of course. And they've been banned. It's like an American piece of ordnance. Let's go to America straight away. Asa, I'll be calling you later. Good day from New York State. He's up in northeastern states, where the Apaches and Comanches still stop him on his way to work in the wagon train. You know him. You love him. It's Neil Long.
What a day I've had so far, Russ. I think it's better than yours.
What?
I've already done one radio show on a different radio station this morning. Went out, did some errands, sent a bunch of flowers to a lovely lady called Jo Howarth, who has been on this show before. It's her birthday today, Jo Happiness Howarth. And I got some carrots and I found a rude carrot. Would you like to see it?
I suppose so. What are you, the Esther Ranson of mental health radio? Jesus. And that was how Ann Summers was born, ladies and gentlemen.
It's not big or clever.
Let's go to Houston, Texas, before we bring on our first guest, Julie Voice. Morning, one and all. Any idea where I try to find my coffee in both? Well, I try to find my coffee in both the dishwasher and the trash can.
Julie, we are your therapist for the next hour. Trust us.
Maybe, Julie, you're thick as mince. That could be the reason. Robert Van Buren, horologist to the stars. Hello, Russ and Neil. And I've lost it, Leslie.
And he won a prize this morning on my other radio show. And Leslie DeMesa, lovely DeMesa.
Yep, it's Mesa. Good afternoon, Russ, Neil, and Asa Don Brown. Right, let's bring on our first guest.
Now, I've done a bit of Googling on this one. I'm very impressed.
This is heavyweight. This is heavyweight, my friend.
The caliber of guests we are getting.
This is heavyweight. Have you got your couch ready? It's only Meg Arnold.
Oh, my God. Hello, Meg.
Hello.
How are you? How are you?
Yes, I'm very well. But I hear that you both have had challenging days so far.
Challenging.
No, he has. I haven't. I've been doing radio shows.
Let me tell you how challenging it is.
He's had a bad day, not me.
No, I haven't had a bad day. It was just a crap start. It was just like, but it didn't put me in a bad mood.
Interesting.
Why is that? Let's examine. In your childhood, did glass ever break? No, I'm not doing that. Well, that's all the time we've got, Meg. If you could see my receptionist on the way out, we can book you next week.
Well, that was.
How does that feel?
Thank you so much.
How does that feel, Dr.
What a
Meg?
brilliant guest. Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Meg. Amazing.
Yeah, how does that feel? Just when you've made a breakthrough. But Dr. Meg, I think we're making a breakthrough. I know, but our time is up. So same time next week. That's how it works. Therapy, ladies and gentlemen, in a nutshell. Tell us all about your... Yes, you know it. You know it. Come on. You know it. Not dealing with the BBC here. We say it as it is. Now then, tell us all about yourself and why you are here. We're delighted.
Tell us about yourself, Doc.
Yes, so I am a chartered psychologist and a chartered scientist, and I do work in the area of health and well-being. So I'm delighted to be here on the Men's Radio Station because specifically you do so much around health and well-being, which is incredibly important. But yes, I am here to talk about my new book, which is out now.
Push it. Yeah, this being, as far as I'm concerned, commercial radio. Shove it right into the camera. We want to see it. Don't be shy, Doc.
Well, it's quite a nice cover. Yeah.
Pluck the backside out of it. It's called Tiny Traumas, but it's a big book.
Yes, no, it is indeed.
Should be called the big book. Should be called the Big Book of Tiny Traumas. Go on.
I probably could have written a whole encyclopedia of these because they really are things that affect all of us on a day-to-day basis. So what you were talking about this morning, Russ, I'm not sure I would call that a tiny trauma or really a tiny T trauma. So we're trying to understand these smaller emotional and psychological, the nicks and scrapes we get all throughout our life build up over time. And we use the kind of tiny t, really, we're thinking about a lowercase t. So we've done so well in the past few decades to talk about major trauma. So big T, capital T trauma. So these are the major events that we know have a substantive and substantial impact on both our physical and mental health. So for instance, being subject to a violent attack, a natural disaster is happening at the moment. That's incredibly traumatic. Capital big T trauma. But actually, there are also life events that do affect us and happen to perhaps more of us. So a lot of us will go
through. This is really interesting. I'm glad you're raising it, because I think before, and in my understanding of this, I've only recently started learning about what we might call, if you agree, small T trauma, if you like. And you put it beautifully. It's like the nicks and scrapes, or the words that you use, that we just get every day. And also you hit on something else that build up over time. So later on in the show, I'm going to ask how we can sort of deal with it as it goes along, so it doesn't build up into something bigger. But I remember someone saying to me, trauma doesn't have to be capital T trauma, but the violent attack, the being in the war zone, someone invading your country, it can be smaller things that affect us and just at the very least take the edge off our well-being, or perhaps worse.
Well, it's actually more often that those things will happen because they're more everyday things. But whenever we're kind of looking at any sort of conditions, we generally start with the most severe. And psychology really isn't that old of a discipline, you know. So we're really just scraping the surface. So it's natural to start with perhaps the more severe types of experiences and then the way they affect people. But we're moving on. As I say, we've done so well. So now to have more nuanced sort of discussion around trauma and mental health. And absolutely. And the thing is, though, it's not just that it is smaller or a tiny trauma or a tiny T trauma. It's actually that the exact same event can happen to two people and affect us in very different ways.
Totally.
So that's why it's about the impact on the individual, not the thing that happened per se. It's how it impacts us.
How you deal with it.
I've had experience of that relatively recently, a couple of years ago, and I've said it publicly on the show before. My mental health was not in a particularly good place, but much better now. And things that normally wouldn't bother me, same stimulus, really cut deep, because I was already in quite a vulnerable state.
You were vulnerable, so it hurts more.
Yeah. Now I'm less vulnerable. It's more like water off a duck's water. I can't even speak. Water off a duck's back, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't really care too much, and
who cares?
Because I'm more sort of grounded in myself, if you like. But so it could depend on a multitude of factors, Meg, I guess.
And that's the thing, because when my clients come to me, often they come and they say, I don't really know why I'm here, because I haven't had this big capital T trauma and I can't quite put my finger on it. And it is more complex. But in that sense, it does take a little bit of time to unravel everyone's unique constellation of both big T life events and tiny T. But once we start kind of really exploring and unpicking these things, it all always makes sense.
And does it then track back to something major, or is it just this compilation and endless drip of tiny little shitty things that drive you mad?
So Russ, it can be either. So for some people, they can pinpoint exactly what it is. It's quite obvious that there was this big T trauma, but there are still tiny T traumas that will intersperse throughout life. There always are. But a lot of us, fortunately, a lot of us haven't had those major traumas, but we have had life events. So life events are things like the death of a loved one. Now, we sadly will all experience that. That wouldn't be termed as a major T trauma, but it would be termed as a life event.
Can I sorry, I need to dice and slice that. Why would that not be seen? If it was not, if you lose a parent and they're 120 years old.
I don't think I would call that tiny. Is there some sort of...
No. So that's exactly, that's what I'm saying. So if we think of trauma on a spectrum, big T trauma, these acute events that really there's lots of research now that shows they change our brain in some really important ways, and they trigger that stress response in such a fundamental way that we become very hypervigilant. Now, that's very, very sort of different from life events that can be incredibly difficult, but they may not sort of trip our safety mechanisms as much as the big T trauma. And there are many life events. So psychologists have a scale of life events, and some of them are relatively minor. So perhaps having a health problem that isn't so serious, but it does affect us. And then the one on the top is losing a loved one. If we lose a loved one very early in life, because it does matter for our survival and our safety, that will often be a big T trauma. But the thing about these smaller, tiny T traumas, they really are things like humiliations, but constantly sort of, perhaps at work, somebody...
bullying.
Yeah, I don't see.
Yeah.
I put that under the umbrella, as Neil's just said, of bullying, of gaslighting, and I don't see those as tiny.
And that's why it's really good to have the
cumulative effect.
It's interesting.
No, exactly, and that's what the tiny T trauma absolutely is. And to have the understanding that it's not the individual events, that it does really build up. And psychologists and therapists, we do term it as a way to just make that distinction, because we want people to really understand that it is a cumulative effect of all these things mounting up. But also because until very recently, we've lived in societies that push a lot of this stuff under the carpet. And that's why your show is so fantastic, because you are shining a light on it.
And it's not healthy to push it under the carpet, because eventually it will build up, and then possibly a physical disease will manifest, won't it? Mind and body.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
I've got a thought here, Dr. Meg. I call you Dr. Meg. I should call you Dr. Arnold. And it's this. When I was a kid, I went with my late parents to Rome, to the Sistine Chapel. The only place that's ever taken the breath out of my body. When I walked in, never seen anything so beautiful in my life. And in the Sistine Chapel was this life-size statue, probably slightly larger than life, but it was a saint or what the hell it was, doesn't really matter. And it was beautifully carved out of marble. It was all Michelangelo, as you know. One of the feet was absolutely perfect, looked like a foot. The other foot was just like a smooth, shapeless blob of marble. And I said to the guide, "Why is that?" I don't know how old I was, 7 or 8 or something, 6, I don't know. And it's because over the years, millions of visitors to the Sistine Chapel had stroked, for good luck, if you believe in all that crap, had stroked the foot of this saint. And over the years, all those millions of tiny little touches had eroded the marble. So it became
I wondered where you were going with that, but that's a great analogy.
My thinking is that if, even you couldn't think of anything less invasive physically than just stroking a piece of what's going to happen. But over the years, and if it happens often enough, it has a huge effect. And I'm thinking, as I'm listening to you, that's what popped into my mind.
And another thing I think why we push it down is we live in a society that can be quite, as I say, psychology is quite a young science, and the importance of our emotional responses, I think, is only being understood. And certain ones, I think particularly maybe in men, but I could be wrong, that we're not supposed to show certain emotions. It's all that stiff upper lip, particularly British, I would have thought. It's a typically British thing. And the consequence of that is not processing it and dealing with it, therefore push it down until it gets possibly to a crisis point. So conversations like this are great, because I'm sure in your book there's plenty of strategies to stop it getting to that point, so we can deal with it as and when it comes up and process as we go along. Maybe. Nicely
said. Absolutely. And what you're talking about there are more macro level tiny T's. So they're things that are cultural, they're societal, but they do affect us as individuals, and it's really important that we do talk about them so that we can make changes, but not just on the individual level, because I think far too often we kind of place all the responsibility and blame on individuals, and actually there's much more we can do as groups. So as human beings, we are group creatures, we can make changes on these bigger macro levels to be able to limit the impact on people. And what I would say with tiny T's is they will happen. And Neil, what you said was really important. It's about developing those coping mechanisms so that when they come up again, you do have a roadmap to not just survive it, but to thrive it, to really get through it in a way.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. I love that. I'm going to put that on the screen. Not just survive, but thrive.
Can we dive into your book? I'd like to dive into it. Walk us through it. What's the main gist and chapters and stuff? What can we learn from it?
So the first chapter really is an overview of everything we've just talked about. But then what I noticed in my practice was that they were very similar presentations. So I've called them themes. So people were presenting with clusters of types of symptoms and experiences. So high functioning anxiety. So feeling anxious a lot of the time, but still managing to, go to work, to do your job, to look after people, but actually really not enjoying life at all and feeling incredibly anxious a lot of the time. Also linked to that is what I call busyitis. So we tend to
busyitis.
Busyholism was the term I heard. Similar thing.
Oh, really?
I've not heard it before, but I want to learn.
And there's some
what is it?
research.
What is that? What is busyitis?
It's really busying yourself, and not just with work, because we talk about workaholism to a point, but not just work, but with everything, just as a way to not really have to get in touch with our feelings, with our experiences, with our inner world. It's an escape, but again, it doesn't serve us that well over time because we're not building up those coping mechanisms. We're not building up ways that we can have that robust level of resilience. So that's another thing.
Interesting, because I know people that have done that. Just get on with it, particularly the generation before my one. I call it the just get on with it generation, and it was my parents, and it served them for years and years and years and years. And as I was growing up, gave me a great sense of security, and it worked until it didn't anymore.
Exactly.
And when it didn't work, this is my mum I'm talking about. Bless her. There was no real resilience to deal with it because she never had the experience to process. Because
I'm older than you, Neil. My mum and dad, of course, came through the war. My mother was a schoolgirl who wasn't evacuated and stayed in London and had the front of the house blown out twice down in Stamford Hill. And Dad was in the RAF. So they didn't have a choice to think.
Well, my mum was born in 1939.
What's that?
My mum was born in 1939, so she was...
Okay. Well, they kind of missed it.
Oh,
no, they didn't miss it.
A really interesting thing, Meg, and I want to hear all about these chapters. What I notice is, I've observed in nature, let's say the wild gazelle gets chased by the lion and escapes. Then you see this vigorous shaking, and it's like they're shaking out all the stress. You see that in the nature programs.
Well, you get chased
so they release it. A cat gets into a fight, the tail puffs up, 2 minutes later, it's all forgotten. But we don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
Well,
you don't play a cat saying, I've just had a fight with the cat over the back, I need to see a therapist. Do you know what I mean? So what do we learn here?
So we also have the innate stress response, which is a fight, flight, or flee response. And so it's incredibly important because it has led us to survive, just like the cats. So interesting, I have a cat and we've just moved house and he's been scrapping in the garden. But yes, he does come down. So what normally happens is with the stress response, our autonomic nervous system, it triggers this cascade of cortisol and adrenaline, and it allows us to fight or to run very fast or to freeze as well. Sorry, to freeze also is very important, especially in the modern day. Now, early humans, they would have had threats. So it could have been perhaps a predator, it could have been other human beings, but they would have been relatively rare. So we needed that response, that physiological response, to help us survive. But the difficulty is we still have that exact same physiological response, but the environment has completely changed.
Yes.
So we have these triggers to the stress response, which is innate, which is inbuilt.
Yeah. The environment's evolved, but we haven't.
Exactly. That's perfect.
So
exactly.
we still, so the boss chews you out, the kids wind you up, the cat doesn't come in for half an hour, and we have a full-on fight or flight response. But because we can't do anything with it, we can't turn around and fight the boss probably, one would hope, or maybe, I don't know. Or we can't, turn around and fight the kids. So we store it in our bodies. But that fight or flight response was meant to be used. It's intense, but it was only supposed to be used, wasn't it, for short bursts?
Yeah.
Not this elongated day by day by day,
Yeah, but we do still need it. So we don't want to get rid of it completely, because say we were driving and a car cut us up, you need to be able to swerve. You need to be able to have those instant reactions. So we still need it, but we need to control it. We need to take back control in our day-to-day lives.
Yes.
So managing stress, managing the stress response is incredibly important. And once we understand more about the physiology, we can do that. So we know that our nervous system triggers this stress response, but we have another arm to our nervous system, which is called the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is our rest and digest nervous system. But we can actually activate that through breathing exercises, through physiological means. But it takes practice. And I would say that one thing it's really important to do is to practice those sorts of things when you're not feeling stressed, so that you'll have some basically kind of muscle memory. So when it comes up, you will know what to do. And stress is different to anxiety, because stress is very, very immediate. It's innate. Anxiety is much more cognitive. So to have a toolkit of different things we can use in different situations is important. And yes, it does take some time and effort to develop that, but it is investment that is so worth it in terms not just of mental health, but physical health, because absolutely chronic stress, we know, can lead to physical health conditions. And so as we would probably, try and do a bit of exercise every day to keep us fit, we can do some psychological and emotional exercises to
good
keep
idea.
us mentally resilient too.
What happens? Hang on, Nelly.
Sorry, Russ.
What I think a lot of people, and I put myself in that club, often suffer not from big things, but from low level anxiety. And you think, I feel uneasy, but why? Why do I feel uneasy? Because I'm pretty much in control of what I'm doing. I'm reasonably happy.
And do we even know why
But
always?
there is, that's my question. That's my question.
Because if it's gone into the unconscious, we might just feel it, but not know why.
What is this low level in the background kind of hum of
I remember once there was a song, this is relevant, this might seem a bit random, but there was a song by Belinda Carlisle called Live Your Life, Be Free. It's a great song. I like Belinda Carlisle. But when I heard it, I felt really uncomfortable. Why? It's just a song playing on the radio.
I feel uncomfortable when Mariah Carey sings, but that's because I can't stand
well, anybody would. But I remember it was associated in my mind, and uniquely my mind, with a bad experience I'd had. And that brought the feelings back up. But so it became conscious, but I guess it's not always conscious. But does it need to be to heal it, Dr. Meg?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I would say with a bit of exploration, we can normally find some clues, but they're not as clear cut as we were talking about before, as with the big T. So it's okay if it's a combination, but sometimes it is just life in general. It just makes us feel a little bit uneasy. I would still say there's lots of ways to be a little bit of a psychological detective here, and to do some work on thinking about, perhaps completing a diary of a day and checking in with yourself throughout the day, how you're feeling, who you're with, and what you're doing, because we run on autopilot. We really do. And this kind of information just really, generally does help us. And it does take a little bit of time to unravel, but it's so, so very important. Some behaviors that I see commonly that really do maintain that constant level of anxiety, news addiction, checking the news very, very, very often, social media.
Doom scrolling.
That's it. Doom scrolling. I have that in the book. Doom scrolling is one. So there actually probably are things, not necessarily from our past, but often, but things that we do every day that maintain that anxiety level.
Without even knowing that we're the ones maintaining it.
Yep. I don't watch the news ever, because it's not news, it's propaganda, and it's all bullshit anyway. So I don't watch it. Because it's just, it doesn't mean I don't know what's going on, but I get it through other means. I will not sit through an hour of doom and gloom, because they want to keep you nervous and they want to keep you worried. That's how they keep control. And the other thing I am learning to wean myself off is stuff, and I've had friends say this to me, and they're absolutely right about social media, because I will read about Meghan and Harry and get furious. And then I'm thinking, wait a minute. I'm never going to meet these idiots.
Yeah. What does it have to do with
They
your
have
well-being?
no impact on me. They're a couple of grifters. Screw them both. I don't care about them. I care as little. I should care as little about them as they care about me.
So why does it make
and
you
so
angry,
now
then?
I just sod them. I don't care. So I don't get annoyed and I don't get upset, because what's the point? What's the point? I don't engage. I never engage on social media. I do it for humor. I do it to promote the radio stations, men's radio and women's radio. I do it to promote stuff that I'm doing, like my book or a stand-up tour or something. But I won't engage. What is the point? You will never convince someone to change their opinion. Why? Because they're as dumb as a box of frogs. That's why, mostly.
But the important thing there is Russ, that you are taking back control. You're taking back control. You have awareness of how it makes you feel. You have awareness that actually it's not important enough for you to engage. For some people it is, and we can kind of work through that. But you know that. And so within my book and within the practice, I developed a 3-step model, a 3-step approach to help people navigate not just the tiny T's, but the life events and the big T's. So all of these things that we experience in life. And that is the first step. So within this triple A approach, the first A is awareness. So you have the awareness that it annoys you, it irritates you.
Sure.
Yes. And then the next stage, actually, this is a perfect example, is the acceptance. So when you say, I'm never going to meet these people, but also I'm not going to change people's minds, you accept that fact. Now that is
absolutely, you got to.
But that is the step that often we find really, really difficult, because we don't really talk about that so much anymore. We talk a lot about awareness, which is amazing, and it's taken a long time to get here. But the acceptance piece, the letting go piece, the moving on piece is very important. But then that's still not enough. We've got to take action. So you are taking action by not engaging with that and doing something else with your time. So those are incredibly important steps, and they can be used with whatever presentation people are having difficulties with.
They're simple, probably, like you say, take a while to master. But having said that, I think nowadays people grow and develop much quicker in these kind of, I don't want to, psychological, spiritual, whatever word we want to use, disciplines. Except, and I also want to point out, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but awareness is not about guilt. It's not about fear. It's just about awareness. It's just a simple, neutral observation of what is so. And I suppose when you get to a neutral place, that's pretty much far down the road to acceptance as well, isn't it? Once you get neutral about it, you're not in that state of resistance. You're not pushing against things. You're not fighting things you can't control, because this is all about changing our responses. It's not about changing the outer world. Russ, you can change your response in a heartbeat to Harry and Meghan, but waiting for them to change, dude, you could wait a very long time. As you know,
it ain't going to happen. I'm just using them as an example. I put them, for example, in the same category as when you see complete lunatics, and I say that as co-founder of a mental health radio station, so I use my words wisely, I hope, of flat earthers. The earth isn't flat. You are not going to convince me.
Yes, it is.
No, New Malden is flat, you idiot. New Malden is flat, not the earth.
I wish my stomach was.
I'm so sorry, Dr. Meg. I have to bring him on. It's a work in progress. You're not going to convince these people. They think the earth is flat. Why? Because they're nuts. What's the point of wasting your energy and time? It's the same thing. I don't
So what we talk about, definitely, is that sphere of influence. So what can we actually control? So we can control, Neil, as you said, we can control our own responses. We can control our own actions. We can't generally control other people and what they're tweeting and what they're doing, the rest of it, but we can control how we react to that. And we bring ourselves back into our own circle of influence. It's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly empowering. If we are waiting for someone to change their mind, if we're waiting for an apology, if we're waiting for even forgiveness, we are giving the power away to other people, and we're not taking it ourselves.
Yeah, it's being at cause of your own
that's
experience. Everything else is being at effect of others, and waiting for an apology. You might wait a very long time.
Yep.
And I heard, I studied some NLP, and they came up with a really clever concept, the word responsibility, which always had a bit of a heavy connotation to me. But if you hyphenate it, response-ability, it gives you the ability to respond rather than re-act. So you don't react and do what you did before unconsciously. Autopilot, you actually respond afresh in a new way.
Absolutely. And having that awareness
that landed home for me. That I'll put it on the screen, that responsibility.
Absolutely. To encourage people to respond and not react is a really important skill. And it is a skill, and it does take practice. It does take practice because innately we are sort of hardwired to react, but we must take control and come back. And then we really can kind of create the life that we do want. Of course, there's going to be difficulties, but we can build up that emotional and psychological immunity, basically, to be able to withstand whatever does come away. Because people are really robust. We are, but
are they really?
Yeah. Oh, Russ, I want to give you some hope.
I don't.
We are.
I don't.
We're all still here, so we can't be doing that.
Yeah, we're still here, but in what shape? I mean, one of the things to learn, and I'm going to put this under your tiny T's, and I learned a very, very long time ago, and it's a two-part thing. And see what you think about it, Dr. Meg. One is, don't write anything unless you want it read out in court. I never send a response, a WhatsApp, and certainly I never an email, ever, if I wasn't happy for it to be read out in court.
Yeah, me too.
You're an idiot.
If I wouldn't say it to your face, I wouldn't put it online.
No, and the other thing is to give yourself a little bit of breathing space.
Yes.
You know, we are all told everything has to be instant. Somebody sends you an email, it really pisses you off. You're furious. Your immediate the knee-jerk reaction of the people who don't think it through is, and I hate you, and you suck, and you got a big ass. Oh, something stupid, you know, and I hate you, I never want to work with you. The sensible, mature way is you let it settle, and you let it, you know, permeate down, and you respond the next day or the day after, when you're calm, when you're rational, because then it
you're giving yourself more options. That is
you're giving yourself the time.
Ability.
But also you're letting some of that very, very heightened emotion sort of pare back a little bit, so that you do, you know, you can engage more in a cognitive level response rather than an emotional response. But Russ, I'm going to challenge you about people not being robust, because I think it's slightly unfair, actually. Really, okay. So say you got a really bad sprain to your ankle. Now it's not broken, but it's sprained. Now, what would you do about it?
Limp.
You would limp.
What would I do? I'd limp. What do you think I'd do?
If you keep limping,
get a stick.
Wow!
Limp.
So you would get a stick. So you would maybe get some support. You might see a medical professional to get some advice of what to do with it. You might get it strapped up. Now, if you don't do those things, what's the likelihood of it getting any better?
I'm going to the back of the class here.
It
might get better. Who the hell knows? I don't know. It's like a headache.
Our emotional and psychological world is the same. We see our physical health is so different. Like when we are sick, if we have a sprain or a break, or if we have a really sort of bad illness, there is no sort of shame in going to a doctor. It should be the same for mental health. It should be the same. There is no there should be no
is that where you were heading? Well, you should have signed part in the way you were heading. Obviously, that's what we say. Every bloody day.
So people aren't less robust. We just need to find tools that suit us in the world today, as we do in physical health, to be able to give people.
Yes, of course.
Those
You're pushing an open door and you're preaching to the choir. You're not going to have an argument with me on that. Coming in from the northeastern United States, it says, Dr. Arnold, I wholeheartedly agree. By the way, Azadon Brown's very high up in the psychotherapeutic community in the USA. We're a resilient species. We're still here. We're still here. So I guess
awareness, acceptance, action. Do you want to walk us through a few examples of this, Dr. Meg? That'd be really nice, just to be a little bit more specific about it, because I like the model. It's nice and simple. It sounds doable. I remember, and I think I also want to raise the point again that people can learn quicker than they think they can. I remember reading a little while ago. It's a guy that wrote the Mars Venus books, Dr. John Gray, and he wrote another book on personal success, and he talked about meditation in there and how quickly people can advance with it. And to give a context, when he was learning to meditate, he was a former monk, and it took him 30 years. No, was it 30 years? Bloody long time, 10 years, But he says now, generations later, people can learn in one weekend what it took him years to learn. So we are equipped with the software to learn not just meditation, but new skills, and it can be done quickly as well. If people think, oh, it's going to be hard, it's going to be a struggle, not necessarily if you get a good teacher and the right skills, right?
No, it can be quick, but what if we can enjoy it while we do it as well? What if it does take some time, but actually it feels so empowering? It really increases our confidence. It increases, our awareness, just even of who we are. So yes, it can be quick, but it doesn't necessarily have to need to be, or we don't have to want it to be either. We do live in a society where we want that quick fix, but I would say that it's worth taking some time too, just for yourself, because it can be a journey that is so, so important that you might want to take some time too.
I love that. I really love that, because it's so worthwhile.
Well, I guess
so
it's like exercise,
so delicious, almost. I'm getting from you. Why wouldn't you want to savor it?
I walk the dog every day. We go for a few miles, unbelievably, and it's like a pain in the ass on one level because I got to go out. On the other, I turn it into something joyful because I listen to my books, and so I get through loads of books, and I enjoy the experience because I'm listening to books that I'm really enjoying in my little earpods. So I guess it's the same thing with what you're suggesting. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. Okay. And I do think that when we build up that sort of muscle, as it were, that psychological muscle, as when you're walking, you're building up your physical muscles in that way, but also you're doing other things too. You're anchoring it with other activities. It is something that brings us a quality of life too, because sometimes I would want to just tether the expectation that we're trying to get to the end. It's not about trying to get to the end where we're at this point that we're finally sort of psychologically fit. It is about the experience of learning skills and also tailoring the different types of techniques to you as well. There isn't a one size fits all, but enjoying it during the process too. And as you say, feeling more grounded in that way, Neil, is important too, like you said previously. And that then is what's sustainable. The difficulties that I see, and oh gosh, I'm guilty of this too, is when we try the quick fixes, they don't really last very long. Of course they don't. So people often come to my clinic and they have tried, a million things, but they were all very small, bitty things that wasn't about this sort of deeper but attainable psychological practice that we can all do.
And the more you do it, the easier you can access it, because as you say, you associate it with other things. You can even make your own associative anchors by think and feel that and tap your arm and all the NLP stuff. So
this is so
it's because the more you do it, it gets better, the better it gets.
Elizabeth's comments coming in from Manhattan, New York. A big moment was when I realized I cannot control other people, only me. Elizabeth hit a nail on the head there. You just can't. You can try. And I don't like the word control, but you cannot, because control has a slightly pejorative feel to it. But I understand what you're saying, Liz. And the thing is, and I am the most guilty of this, I admit, but you can't, if people are that way, they are that way. And it's not your responsibility. I hear myself saying this and I'm beating myself up at the same time. Not your responsibility to make them change.
But it isn't.
Yeah, but it's hard to accept. But Neil, I know that. But it's hard to accept. It's hard to accept. If you think someone's doing something really wrong, I don't mean robbing a bank or shooting people. I mean leading their life in a way which is just negative and not right. There's only so many times you can say, I don't think, but it's hard because you want to help.
I mean, and it's particularly hard when it's a loved one as well. It's particularly hard in that way. But we can offer support, and we do know that positive social support is so important for both physical and mental health. So there are some things we can do, but we in terms of trying to change someone's mind, it is very, very, very difficult in that respect. But we can be there for them. We can do that.
Interesting.
I can see your wheels are turning.
I'm thinking about it. There's so much to process. Neil,
what if it is obvious that someone is doing things that don't serve them, and they are a loved one, but they are hell bent on not changing their mind, but still need you to behave a certain way so they can keep up the charade, if you like, of what they're doing? So in a sense,
can you give an example, if you could?
How do you not be an enabler, albeit unconsciously? When do you walk away and say, I love you, but I really can't help anymore? I've done all I can. And there is a time to do that, I think. Maybe.
So if that relationship, if that enabling relationship, and sometimes it is codependency, if that is affecting your health, both psychological, physical, but also your ability to carry out what we call activities of daily living. So if it's affecting ability to work, if it's affecting ability just to do your general tasks in your day, to have other relationships, I would encourage people to seek support, actually, because you will need support in that too. But there are some relationships, unfortunately, that really no longer serve us. And that is hard for us to accept. But there are relationships that we do need to walk away from too.
I think so. I think sometimes some relationships that you can see, narcissistic ones, I would say, for a start.
Yeah, so Russ, the sort of things that you were mentioning before as well. So if there are relationships that have coercive control, where there's gaslighting, where there is a huge amount of undermining, and the thing about more the tiny T trauma is a lot of these things are very, very subtle, and they often show up in friendships in a more subtle way. So we kind of don't really know what's wrong, but we know we don't feel right. But it's just odd. So someone kind of giving you lots of backhanded compliments, someone undermining you, you're walking away feeling exhausted. So if you've got some energy vampires around you, it would be worse.
Mood hoovers.
Oh, I love that.
You can have that one.
I've never heard that before. That's fantastic.
Well, they do. They come into a room and suck the life out of it. That's what they do.
So it's
energy vampires is so. My late wife used to call people energy vampires. She was so right. We just got rid of them all because they were ghastly. And they ghastly. And the thing is, you have to try and recognize them. And you think, Jesus, is this person adding anything apart from driving me around the bend? And it's on a much more subtle level than that, isn't it?
Tell us some more about your wonderful book, Dr. Meg. And let's see it up at the camera again. Shameless plug. Come on.
Yeah, shameless.
Parade it shamelessly. Tiny traumas. When you don't know what's wrong, but nothing feels quite right. I like that. I like that.
That is really good. Elizabeth Green in Manhattan is saying, by the way, we read this out because it goes out on other radio stations who don't see us, they only hear us. I had a situation with where's it gone?
Sorry.
Thank you, Neil. Damn fool. He's no good, but he's cheap. I had a situation with the old one. I know. I had a situation with a very old friend last night. She has given up on life. Oh, crap. But she says, but then we had a lot of texts. I hate that. I knew I had to listen, love her, but not sure what else. What else to do? Question coming in from New York City.
So if someone is expressing any suicidal thoughts or feelings, it absolutely to signpost to professionals in that sense. Incredibly important. Having that sort of feeling, though, that perhaps the behavior is incongruent with what this friend is saying, that would really encourage a conversation. So in the book, I have a specific sort of process, again, for having a difficult conversation, often with friends, and it's called the own process. So yes. So you own it.
Okay.
So the O is for openness. You come to the conversation with openness. So we try and leave our preconceptions at the door. And by using sort of first person terminology, it really limits how defensive someone else might feel. So to say something like, I am worried about you, or you've sent quite a lot of communications and that they are distressing, and I would really like to see if we could perhaps signpost to get you some help. First person terms, though, not anything that's too sort of confronting. It often leads to much better outcomes.
I feel, not you make me feel.
Exactly.
Well, that's good.
And then the W is for wonder and curiosity. So approach it is objectively but positively, in the sense that, again, let's just explore this. What is happening here? So asking, what is happening? What's going on with you? And again, to be the focus on the other. But actually, the N for own, it does stand for no. So sometimes these conversations don't go exactly the way we want them to, and to have the awareness and the acceptance that can happen. And sometimes people are not going to come to the conversation with as much openness and with as much wonder and curiosity, and they're just going to shut it down. And in that situation, it's up to us to say no and to have a boundary and say, actually, no.
This mirrors the situation in my life very recently, and I didn't know that acronym then. But it went from the O to the no. There you go.
You're writing her next book, Neil.
I'm a hive of ideas. But you're absolutely right. But there is a time when you do have to walk away and put yourself first, because only you can put your own oxygen mask on. And if someone really is that toxic around you, then they do need a boundary putting in, friend or not.
This coming in from Texas in Houston. My stepchildren are mood hoovers. Oh, blimey. They send my anxiety levels through the roof. Wow. So sorry about that. Sorry, Julie voice. So what does the wonder stand for again? Just give me what the W stands for.
The wonder. So to approach it with I wonder, with curiosity again. So asking more questions and really being open to listen, rather than coming to it with a critical mindset. We do tend to be, we're very critical of ourselves, actually, but to have that sense of wonder, that sense of, okay, let's be very open-eyed to this and allow and listen to what someone's saying and allow for pause. But again, as I say, it doesn't always work out exactly the way we want. But going back to being able to let people go or to say no, it's not just that they may be draining us. Actually, we have a finite amount of time, don't we? In a day, in a week, in a lifetime.
In a lifetime.
Finite amount of time. And some really fascinating research shows that in general, we can only maintain 5 close relationships. So the number of fingers on our hand, if one of those is filled with someone who may be toxic, who may be draining, who could actually be, a little bit worse than that and perhaps verging on abusive, if that's really filling one of those fingers, we don't have room for another person that could be nurturing us, that could be bringing us some very positive things to our life. So it's really quite useful to think about it in terms like, do I want you to be one of my 5? And it's okay to let people go. So a really good friend of mine, a really lovely friend of mine, Jennifer Kennedy, who's an amazing comedian, she said, she gave me this quote that she found in a poem, and she said, friends are for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And I just thought that was so good, because it's okay to let some of these relationships go, but sometimes they come back. They do. Sometimes they are seasons,
but
they
also,
do come back.
I think you'd agree, Meg, that people evolve, and as you get older, I am very aware of time being very finite, and I've had examples in my life where, and certainly you go through social media and people that and even if you only know them maybe through Facebook and you've had nice interactions and suddenly they've just gone, you think, Jesus, we're a similar age, or they may be younger. We don't know what the hell's around the corner. So that life and time is finite, and the older you get, unless you're dumb as a box of rocks, that time's not going to be extended. So
pick your 5 carefully.
Those, and don't break your hand as well. Yeah, interesting. This book, by the way, because we have so many guests, we've had thousands of guests, and most of them got a book or something that they're promoting, which is obvious. This sounds really practical, which is what I love. I don't like the theoretical. It's like, which is why we kind of dive quite deep, because anyone can come up with theories, but when you try and apply them to real life, you think, well, that's fallen apart like a lumpy custard because it's just a theory. But your book sounds extremely hands-on, practical, which is great.
It basically is my clinic and my practice in a book. So these are techniques I use every single day with clients, and I know they work. They are evidence-based and they are based on theory too, but they're my favorites as well. There are many other out there, but they're my favorites and ones that tend to work with the kinds of presentations I see. So I generally see people, as I say, they really don't know what's wrong, but they don't feel quite right. But perhaps if you went to the doctor, you might not meet all the criteria for major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. And you might kind of be a little bit pushed away or perhaps even fobbed off. There's this huge raft of people who fall in this gray area. So not quite bad enough to be diagnosed with a specific condition, but certainly
still enough to take the edge off their well-being.
Exactly. So that's where my work lies. And there are so many things that people can do. But again, we need to discuss these more, and we need to give out these tools and really, just highlight that there are practical solutions. And you're right, Russ, it's not just theory. Theory is incredibly important, but we do need to be able to give people things they can do on a day-to-day basis in their own lives.
And indeed get the feedback from that and tweak it according to their personal needs.
Absolutely.
Meg, you look like a friend of mine. I've been meaning to say this all show. You look like my friend Joe. You look really similar. You've got a doppelganger.
Are you sure it isn't? Liz Saul says this: I love the conversation today. It resonates with me, and so many things I say too and have with my homies. Was she down with the kids or something? My close circle of friends, we have each other's backs. We are blunt, well, presumably not the art historian traitor, and honest about situations. We help and are there for each other.
Wow, that's wonderful.
That's nice. That's good.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's really, really good.
I think you need people like that because life, it's not simple, and you need those to help you to kind of navigate it through, or even just bounce a thought or an idea off to get some sort of reaction.
And when you're doing that, it's important to have the right people around you, people that have your best interests at heart and aren't just there to aggrandize their own ego or to use you as some sort of joke or make some sort of sarcastic swipe off in vulnerable states.
But it takes
the last thing on earth
leap of faith. It takes a big leap of faith to be really honest. Now, as everybody knows, I've made no secret of it. Every Saturday, my two closest pals and I meet for a cigar and a coffee in Soho, and everything's on the table. Everyone says, "Oh, can we join you?" No, you can't. No, it's just the three of us. Or it's just the two of us if one's on tour or if one's busy directing, producing a movie or something. Because it's our Saturday, it's fun, it's great, we laugh like crazy, but it's a little therapy session as well. And it's really, really good. So I'm resonating with what Liz says, which is why we don't allow anybody else to come along, because it's a social thing, but it isn't. And we wouldn't allow anybody to hear ever what we discuss, ever.
But that's a safe space. That's a safe space. And it's amazing that you are maintaining the boundary and keeping that space for each other.
Oh, yeah.
That's absolutely fantastic, because it can be really easy to be like, oh, okay, just let someone else in. But you know your parameters. You know the boundaries.
And also because what you just said about Joe, it's freaking me out now, Neil. I can see.
Do you know what I mean?
I see exactly what you say.
You know what I mean?
It hadn't occurred to me, and now all I'm thinking.
You really do. Yes. Which is a compliment, Meg, by the way.
It's a big compliment.
I'm sure.
A very attractive woman. Here's the thing. It's also because you know in your heart that other people want to join because they want something. They want something from my musician pal, or they want something from my film producer pal, or they'll want something from me. They'll want something underneath it. Eventually out will come, oh, I've got this new thing. Could you? No, it's not about that. It's three people who don't want anything from each other except each other's friendship and comradeship and support.
You end up
That's
giving each other
it.
so much more, which is why
Say again, Neil. Say it again.
And paradoxically, in needing nothing from each other, you end up giving each other so much more, and that's why that boundary and that space.
Absolutely,
unnecessary.
Absolutely right. And people think, oh, we're being rude. We're not being rude. We're protecting ourselves. That's what we do. That's our 2 hours of warm friendship every week. That's what's important. That's what's important.
Your book is available on Amazon, I see.
Yes, in stores.
It's not your only book, is it? You've written others, haven't
you? It's I've written quite a few books. The other books are about specific medical conditions, so they're more patient information guides. But yes, I've been in this world for a long time. So my research, so I do research too, is in sort of health and well-being. So I've worked with patients who have a variety of different presentations. And sometimes they seem to be sort of more physical, but obviously we know the mind and body interact just so intrinsically that there are often things we can do on a physiological level that help our mind, but also there are things we can do psychologically that help our bodies too. So it's
all
great,
an interconnected system.
Absolutely.
And the latest one, Tiny Traumas by Dr. Meg Arnold, available on Amazon. Type your name in.
And if you want to know more about Dr. Meg, her website is, and correct me if it's like it's psychic connection, Longy. Dr. Meg Arnold. It's doctor as in the short form, Meg Arnold, which is spelt, if you're listening to this, ARROLL.com. Doctor like DR, megarroll.com. And all the information will be there. Thank you so much. What a fantastic conversation.
It's been an honour and a privilege, Dr. Meg. Thank you.
Great.
Oh, for me too.
Thank you so much, and good luck with the book. If you ever want to come back, you have an open
come
door.
back and see us again. Always a warm welcome here.
Just speak to Julia. She will sort it out for you.
I will indeed. Thank you so much, and have a lovely day.
I'm going to do my best. Okay, bye. Thank you so much.
Bye, Dr. Meg. She does not look like Joe, doesn't she?
Oh, it's freaking me out.
Now, I've got a solution, just a quick infomercial, if I may.
Yes.
If you've got a mood hoover in your life, what you need is a mood hoover. It's a mini hoover.
Sweet, look at that little thing.
You just put it on here and suck out the other people's bad mood that they gave you.
Yeah. You know what? The trouble is, you think that's just for a desk. That is Ken Evans's full-size hoover. Right. That is his full-size hoover. You know that.
So
that's what Ken uses in his home. He goes around with that.
Available on neillong.com. Neil Long's mood hoover. Look, I feel better already. Look.
That's very, very good. What have we got here? We've got just we got a few minutes. I have the same thing with my friend Jude. Our Wednesday lunches are sacred. That's out in Houston, Texas. And Elizabeth Green.
And you know what happens if you mix up sacred? It's an anagram of scared. So don't do it.
Interesting. I care about people, but can't do it for you. I don't know what that means, Elizabeth. I don't know what that means.
I know exactly what she means. Only people, you can give people the safe space to process and make the changes if you want to, but only you can. Only they can do it. You can't. You can show someone how to walk, but you can't walk for them. You can show someone how to breathe, but you can't breathe for them.
Oh, I see what you're saying. All right, I got it, Elizabeth. Okay, I've really enjoyed that. She was a terrific guest.
So I can't hear you. Sorry.
What's that? I said she was a terrific.
Sorry, somebody was making noise.
Oh, was somebody making a noise? Was it the man who owns the tiny Hoover? The tiny Hoover. By the way, I've just got 1 minute to say that from next Wednesday, Neil Long, big excitement. We have a new permanent guest every Wednesday at 12:30. Her name is Hattie Suvari, and she is going to be looking at your legal problems, because legal problems are a huge freaking stress. And every week we're going to be looking at a particular legal issue, and she is no nonsense. There's no legalese. She cuts straight to the chase. We had a
I think
meeting,
that's great.
and I'm very excited about this.
Because
Neil,
often
you're going to
people
enjoy
face legal challenges when they're already going through another difficult
The
time.
first one is divorce and all the things that go through it. It may be you, it may be your kids, it could be your grandchildren.
Speaking of which, if we got room for another guest next week, we had a lovely lady on here called Tosh Britton, and we invited her back when her book was released, which is all about healthy divorce. So maybe squeeze it in.
Boom!
Shall I try and book it for next Wednesday? Shall I do my best?
See if we can. I have to look at my schedule. Until then,
we will do that. We'll do that off air. I'm going to go and play with my mood hoover. Look at that.
Brilliant. Okay, bye everybody, and thanks for being so interactive. Without you, there is no show. Bye, gang.